This is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in the early 90s, this is most definitely my favourite games console. Before this, we had a ZX Spectrum, a Sega Master System, and a Mega Drive, but the Snes has my favourite games ever and I just love everything about this thing. I found this stash of old gaming stuff in the loft and was actually surprised to find that I still had this Snes, the cables, and a modest selection of games. After confirming that it all just about worked, I started looking into what can be done to modify it, use it with modern TVs, and add new functionality to this old diamond. The first thing I wanted to get sorted out was the case. It's a bit mouldy from however many years of entropy in the loft, but that was easy to fix by cleaning it with soap and water. The yellowing of the case is nothing to do with smoking, it's actually caused by a fire retardant chemical that they used to mix into the plastic. This stuff turns yellow after prolonged exposure to UV daylight, but there's a process called retrobrighting which can be used to fix it. Check out my Game Boy video for details on that, or even better, check out a channel called Odd Tinkering where you can find lots more useful information. It didn't work so well on the Game Boy, but the Snes bleached quite nicely and almost returned to its original colour. Now that it's cosmetically pleasing, I wanted to look at what was out there as far as mod chips go. The most appropriate one for this console is this one, the supercic UIGR chip. This lets you do a few cool things. You can play games from any region, you can run PAL EU games in full screen, more on that later. You can reset the game and adjust other settings from the controller. The most interesting of these to me is the full screen thing, and I just wanted an excuse to open it up and get the soldering iron out really. The Snes is easy to open up as long as you have one of these game bit screwdrivers, which are pretty easy to get hold of. You can replace the case screws with standard posi drives to make it easier next time if you want to. To do this mod, we need to take everything right out and access the underneath the cartridge slot, as this is where the mod chip connects to the board. But hold on a goddamn minute! There's something really important you have to do before you open up a Snes. When you unplug it from the power, you'll find that if you turn it on, you'll see the power light come on for a moment when you flick the power switch. This was the source of much debate when I was a kid, but it's just because the capacitors inside store an electrical charge even after power off. So you must power on after unplugging it to discharge those capacitors. If you don't, you could damage the console and even shock yourself. I actually made this mistake and blew up this fuse F1. Epic fail. It was easy to find a new one and replace it, but I was lucky to not have done more damage. Once we've stripped everything out, this is what the main board looks like. It's a really straightforward design and easy to see what does what, which is helpful. The connector in the middle is the cartridge slot, and if we turn the board over, the pins of the cartridge slot are what we're going to solder the mod chip onto. Where the chip is going to overlap some components on the board, I decided to cover it with some duct tape to prevent anything nasty from happening. To solder the chip on, we just line it up with the pins, push it down a bit and solder away. Next we have to do something about the Snes's own kick chip. Kick, or CIC, stands for Checking Integrated Circuit, and this thing handles the region locking and anti-piracy for the console. Our mod chip replaces it so that we can do all the new funky stuff. If you have access to a heat gun, you can remove this chip altogether. I couldn't get one at the time, so the other option is to remove the power connections to the chip, making it a dead duck. I did this by lifting the pins carefully using desoldering braid, flux, and a craft knife. I've since got some new braid as the stuff I was using was old and ineffective. Once these four legs are all in the air, we're done with the kick chip. This Snes has two chips called PPU1 and PPU2. PPU is Picture Processing Unit, so these kind of make up the graphics engine of the Snes. In later designs they combine them into one chip and the picture quality improved. These are now highly sought after, but this Snes is an OG one and has the original two chips. We need to either lift a leg on each of them or cut the track to a leg and solder a wire onto it. I'm going with the cut method, so I'm just going to make a little incision with my craft knife on the correct track for each chip. When you think you've got it, you can check that the pins are disconnected with a multimeter. Next, there are a whole bunch of wires to connect between the mod chip and the board. I'm going to skip through this as it's pretty straightforward stuff. You just pick the right connection and solder away. Two of the wires are going to go through the small holes in the PCB called vias. They will then connect to the two pins on the PPU chips, which we cut earlier. This is fiddly because the legs of the chip are quite fine and it's hard to get a good connection. Once they're soldered on, we're very nearly finished. we need to replace the red power LED with a red-green LED so we can see what state the Snes is set for. I'll take out the controller port module and carefully desolder and remove the red LED. This was actually really difficult for some reason. Next we take our red-green LED, which has 3 leads instead of 2. The innermost is the anode and the 2 outer ones are cathodes, one for red and one for green. I'm going to twist a pair of wires together and connect it to these 2 points on the mod chip. The other ends connect to the cathodes on the LED, and we have this flying lead thing that's going to the controller port. It's a bit flimsy, but there's lots of room to move in the Snes, and there's slack to play with on the lead. Now that it's done, let's have a look at what the heck this thing does. The main feature is that we can switch between the Euro PAL standard 50Hz and the US NTSC standard 60Hz. This means that the game speeds up a bit, and also the image fills more of the screen, which is nice. There are some games which don't like running at 60Hz and will flicker or jitter. There is another mod you can do to fix this, but it's quite expensive and I might think about that another time. To switch between the modes, you press L, R, select, and A, B, or Y. You can switch between 50Hz, 60Hz, or auto detect, which goes by the region of the cartridge. The LED goes red, green, or yellowish, which is red and green, to tell you what it's set to. You can press L, R, start, and select to reset the game from the controller. Next up is a way to prolong the lifetime of the Snes so that it's still going strong for another 30 years at least. What we're going to do is replace some parts called electrolytic capacitors. These are the things which hold the charge that I mentioned earlier, and they tend to leak and degrade over time. They won't make any difference here because the console's working well, so this is just a little preventative service measure I'm doing while I'm here. The new parts look very similar, which is good, and I did do a bit of research to find high quality replacements. First I'll change the big boy, which is the one that will zap you if it's still charged. This one goes through the board, so we just pop it in, solder, and cut off the legs. The others are all surface mount and will come off fairly easily with some light persuasion. I usually add a bit of solder when I'm taking things off. This livens up the ancient 90s solder and makes it flow a bit better. The new ones just sit right in place of the old ones and we're good to go. Now we can just reassemble this thing quick, and then we're going to look at the different ways to play this thing on your modern TV. Snes has a video output of 320 by 240 pixels, which is pretty teeny weeny compared to a modern TV. Your home TV is probably an HD resolution like 720p, 1080p or 4K. So as you can see, the Snes image would be tiny if your TV showed it in its native resolution. Luckily, most TVs will upscale small images to larger sizes so that they fill more of the screen. This is done by multiplying the lines being output. Different TVs handle this with different levels of success, and sometimes the image will come out blurry. A way around this is to use an external device to handle the upscaling, which will handle it in a much more efficient way and give better picture results. It also means that you can connect into the TV using HDMI and an RGB signal, which is the highest quality you can get out of the Snes. I went for this thing, the Rad2X. This is a line doubler, which means that the input into the TV is increased to 480p. The TV then handles the upscaling after that to fill the screen. 240p is a weird format which your TV might not understand, while 480p it should be able to deal with. There are other more expensive and complex upscalers like OSSC, FrameMeister, and RetroTink 5X, which will increase the signal up to 1080p or even 4K and give even better results. The Rad2X is affordable, plug and play, and it gives good results. I tried to capture what it looks like here with my camera, but it's hard to show without seeing the actual screen. The other way to go is to use RF if your TV still has an analog tuner. This is how I used to play everything when I was a kid, and I had no idea that any other option was available. It looks pretty bad on this 4K TV, but if this is all you have, it's still pretty playable if you sit far enough away. Retro gaming has spiked in popularity, and another popular way to go is to get an old CRT TV and use that for your retro games. Consoles like Snes were made to be used with CRT TVs rather than flat panels, and the games do look great when played on them. The nostalgia factor is huge, and I could see this being in a little gaming corner somewhere in my house maybe, someday. Probably never happen, but hey, I can dream. This one came from a clear out of Nan's house, and it's a late model with a flat screen and a DVD player built in. Goodman's used to be a crappy brand, but I think this one is from late in the CRT era, and so it looks pretty good. There are plenty of options out there on eBay or in classified ads if you're interested in getting one. You can pick up a bargain pretty easily. I'm using a SCART cable from the Snes to get good quality RGB into the TV. For all this kind of stuff, the best mine of information I found is called retrorgb.com. They have regular podcasts, tutorials, product reviews, everything. Go check it out. Another awesome way to go is to use emulators. Snes emulation is very mature and doesn't take very powerful hardware, so you can play on your PC, a Raspberry Pi, an Android TV box, your phone, whatever really. There are other awesome advantages like being able to save games whenever you want and being able to use modified games. There is a huge mod scene with entirely new games based on your favourites or tweaks and fixes to existing games. It's also possible to make some games run in widescreen so that they fill your TV. Someone even added CD quality audio to Super Mario World, which is just insane. As a disclaimer, most of the footage I captured for this video was from emulators, just because it's a really easy way to go. I was happy playing games on my Nvidia Shield, which is a great emulator, but I also wanted to get the real Snes going when I realised that I still had it. Another way to go is to buy a Snes clone console. There are a few out there, but the most notable one is called the Analog Super NT. This thing will play Snes games in 1080p and make them look fantastic without having to modify anything. All these ways to play are great, it just depends on what you have and whether you want to collect cartridges. Just playing these classic games whichever way you like is really the important thing. Now that the Snes is ready to go, what if I could replace these crap third-party controllers with official Nintendo ones? And what if the official Nintendo ones were somehow Bluetooth? We can do it! Nintendo released Bluetooth controllers for the Switch so that you can enjoy Snes games with the original controller layout on their online Snes game library, which is another great way to play Snes games, by the way. A company called 8BitDo makes these Bluetooth Snes controller clones and also Bluetooth receivers to go into the Snes controller port. A little while ago they released a firmware update so that you can use the official Nintendo Bluetooth controller with the receiver. So here we go, official Snes Bluetooth controllers. Now everything is done, what else is there? Well, I want to try and get a new cartridge slot for the Snes, as it seems to have a tough time when you put in certain games. The blowing the connector trick only goes so far. You can also take the games apart and clean the connectors with IPA, which will probably help. After that, you can buy a cartridge called FX Pack Pro, which lets you put all the game ROMs on an SD card and into the Snes, but it's quite expensive. Until then, let's just enjoy these games. I'll put some useful links in the description, ask me some questions and stuff in the comments, and be good. Bye! Get out of the way! Ow, 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 ow. That last part. Garbage.